Hi, this is Adam Eliel Berkowitz of Israel 365 coming to you live from the Golan. We had a little bit of a change in programming. Today we're going to be speaking to David Sidman, the managing editor of Israel 365 News. We're going to be discussing a rising issue that I think a lot of people in America are unaware of. There are currently protests going on in Israel, a lot of tension between the Israeli government and what I'll call them settlers, though that is a highly inaccurate and horrible term. Residents of Judea and Samaria, this was sparked off by the death of Ahuvya Sandak, a 17-year-old young man who's 17 years old from Bat Ain, who was killed in a police chase. The police believed that he and other young men were throwing rocks at Arabs, and the police chased them. There are allegations that the police car pushed them off the road. The car flipped over. The other youths in the car were taken to the hospital, and Ahuvya was actually left underneath the car for over an hour. The protests are going on nightly in Jerusalem and in several other locations, and I think it's very important to emphasize and to understand that this is not a one-time occurrence that's leading to these protests. This is a sign of tensions that have been growing amongst the people who live in Judea and Samaria. David, I'd like to get your take on it. What do you think is the underlying tension? Why so much tension? I should have pointed out also that 10 people were arrested last night by the police at the protest. One of the policemen who was involved in the incident was arrested. So this is an ongoing incident and an ongoing issue. What do you see as the underlying tension?
So it's important to understand, first of all, that the battle between the Israeli government and Israelis who live in Judea and Samaria is much bigger than just Ahuvya Sandak. The murder of Ahuvya Sandak, may God avenge his blood, is just the kind of the watershed moment in the history of the ongoing battle between the Israeli government and the settlers. So this is a phenomenon that I've been actually researching for a very long time. What a lot of people don't realize is that there's a lot going on in Judea and Samaria that is not being reported in the news. Meaning, every day, the Israeli government destroys the houses of Jewish Israeli families in Judea and Samaria. They claim that the reason is because they build them illegally, but they, first of all, make conditions that make it completely impossible to obtain legal permits to build those houses. And we're talking about families that need houses. And on the other hand, Arabs in Judea and Samaria build their houses almost with complete immunity, with barely any destruction from the army who actually controls the place.
If I may, to put this into perspective, people may not understand or even believe what you're describing. I was a resident of Bat Ain, the community that Ahuvya was born and raised in, and my children were very good friends with him at a young age. There was a neighborhood built in Elazar, which is very near there, and they knocked down an entire neighborhood because each of the houses extended off their land half a meter, less than the size of a closet, and they knocked down an entire neighborhood.
Yeah, well, it's obvious that there is an organized effort to make the lives of Israelis living in Judea and Samaria as difficult as possible in hopes that they'll leave.
Absolutely. Also, I want to point out there's a double standard. Most of the municipal issues in Judea and Samaria are overseen by Kogat, the IDF branch. So to get my house built, I had to get a permit just to get the electricity hooked up, a permit from the army. And they don't meet that often. They did especially make it difficult. And when you say that the Palestinians, they have rejected the Oslo Accords, and they are now building without any permits at all on land that, according to the Oslo Accords, should have gone to Israel. And they're building without permits. This is the reality. And I'm sorry, yeah.
Well, what's important to understand is that a lot of people, especially on the left, claim that the alleged Palestinians suffer under Israeli military occupation. What they don't realize is that Jewish Israelis suffer just as much, maybe more, under Israeli government military occupation than the Arabs do. Meaning, if you were to live in a city like, I don't know, Tel Aviv, you want to build a house, and the Tel Aviv and the municipality, the mayor of Tel Aviv, makes it very difficult for people to build homes there. And there's a problem, and people are frustrated that no one in Tel Aviv can get permits to build homes. They vote him out, and they vote in a new mayor who will be much more lenient about housing restrictions.
You can't vote out the army.
Exactly. In Judea and Samaria, we basically live under this politicized military regime, for lack of a better term. And I, as someone who served in the IDF, it's a very bittersweet pill to swallow, because I serve in the IDF, and now I realize that in many ways I'm fighting against them just to enjoy basic human rights in the promised land. So,
I mean, that is the sad irony, that the people who live in, and that's the people who live in Judea and Samaria, 100%, the reason why they live there is because they love Israel, they love God, they love the Bible, and here they are in a protest, standing angry across from the representatives of the state that they love. And that's the sad irony.
So what's happening now is that love, in my opinion, is slowly turning into resentment. And essentially so let's talk a little bit about the Hilltop Youth. There's a group of teenagers in Israel who, in any other society, would be considered the most saintly, incredible kids you could possibly ask for. These are kids who go out into the field, and they're literally 16 and 15 and 17-year-olds building houses for the sole purpose of ensuring that the land that God promised the Jewish people stays theirs. They're putting facts on the ground, and they're doing everything a 16-year-old could to make sure that the evil Palestinian Authority doesn't encroach any more than they already do on Jewish land. Meaning, there is a cold construction war going on in Judea and Samaria between the Arabs, and the only Jews who are on the front line fighting this construction war are these Hilltop Youth. And what's happening is the Arabs are building homes like it's going out of style. And the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to land grab, and they're trying to ensure that Jews who live in the settlement blocks will not be able to expand. So the Palestinian Authority basically funds these homes to be built strategically in areas where it'll be very difficult for settlers to essentially expand their towns and villages. And these Hilltop Youth, who are essentially teenagers who love God, love the land, don't cause trouble, don't do drugs, despite what the media says, by and large, are just basically building homes. And there is an entire police unit called Yamar Shai, and they are dedicated to essentially nothing but prosecuting these poor teenagers. And it's not just the police unit. There's also a unit of the Shabak, which is the Israeli General Security Services. It's the secret police. And they have a unit also dedicated to these teenagers. I mean, like, you can't make this stuff up.
That's another point that I think that people are absolutely unaware of. maybe even Israelis in Tel Aviv. It's what's the
Totally.
sad irony is they call it the Jewish unit, and there were many cases of them. Israel has no habeas corpus, meaning the police can detain you for as long as they want without charging you, without bringing any charges for no reason other than they say, well, we need to arrest this guy. And this was usually used for very good reason against Arabs who were terrorists or were involved in terrorist activity. But it's being used now against the Jews who live in Judea and Samaria. And there have been actual cases and testimonies of people, of Jewish youth, even under the age of 17, who have quite literally been tortured. And it pains me to say this. And it's not widespread, God forbid. And it's not, and of course, not the entire government, and of course, not the entire police. But there is a tension, a division within the Israeli culture that unless we look at it and address it, we will not be able to mend it, and Israel will stay divided.
Well, I don't really care if it's in the Israeli culture. What I care about is if it's an official unit in the Israeli police, which it is. Now, the Yamar Shai, of course, they will not say that they are only they were established to only prosecute Jewish teenagers in Judea and Samaria, but in reality, that's all they do. And so you can look at the reports. They're supposedly supposed to be specialized in nationally motivated attacks, and they have not dealt with one incident. They have not filled out one report of Arab terrorism or Arab nationalistically motivated attacks, with over 200 last year of just Jewish. Now, and a lot of these reports, a lot of what these Jewish kids are arrested for are essentially trumped up charges because they didn't really do anything wrong. But Yamar Shai, this police unit, who is much more heavily funded, and its officers receive more money because they get what's called a danger bonus. So it's considered like the Yamar Shai is considered like an elite unit. It's a badge of honor for the police to serve in Yamar Shai. It's more money, it's better equipment. They're very well funded, and their job is to basically find crime where it doesn't exist. And so they're essentially chasing around these teenagers. And if you look at the charges they file them on, sometimes there's no charges at all. They just arrest them for no apparent reason. Many times it's things that there's zero evidence of. They've been caught lying to the media, saying that they took DNA evidence of a rock that was thrown at an Arab vehicle that killed an Arab woman. Turns out not only was she not killed by a rock that was thrown by them, but no DNA evidence was even collected. This was reported by the Forensic Institute, Abu Kabir, which is outside of Tel Aviv. And another watershed moment was the Duma attack, where there was an arson in an Arab village, and a baby died in the arson attack. And and even though they were involved in a clan war, and even though eyewitnesses said the car pulled up with two people,
and even though there was no actual physical evidence,
basically, I'm not going to get into it right now. But long story short, if you want to learn more, feel free to email me or do your own research. All the evidence pointed to an inter-clan feud. It was blamed on one of these poor Hilltop Youth kids who didn't really have access to an attorney, was tortured into a confession. The judge admitted that he was tortured into confession, but they still didn't exonerate him from the charges, and now he's basically serving a life sentence for a crime that everyone knows he didn't commit. So after all this persecutions and chasing them down and basically witch hunting these Hilltop Youth teenagers, it all kind of came to a head 2 weeks ago when the police claimed that a group of these Hilltop Youths were throwing rocks at Arab cars, and they drove behind them and tried to pull them over. And allegedly, the passengers, the vehicle didn't listen, so the police rammed the back of the vehicle to get them to pull over. There's just one problem with that. According to police protocol, there's no ramming, not in Israel. Police are not allowed to ram on a high-speed chase to get a car to stop in Israel, not even if they believe their lives are in danger. So the police essentially violated protocol by ramming this vehicle. The vehicle flipped over, and instead of seeing if the people inside the vehicle were okay, they immediately handcuffed them all. The passengers in the vehicle told the police that their friend Ahuvya Sandak was still in the vehicle and that he's stuck inside. The police ignored them. After an hour, the police finally decided to check the vehicle. They found that this poor kid was dead, stuck underneath, and died from the pressure of being stuck underneath an overturned vehicle that the police caused. The police tried everything to hide this incident, which is why they prevented all media and even a member of Knesset, also against the law. The police are not allowed to stop the movement of a member of Knesset from going to the scene of the crime. And there's actually a video of a member of Knesset wrestling with one of the police officers.
Bezalel Smotrich.
Yeah.
A young right-wing. I like him. He's a good guy.
Okay. So essentially, now what we have here is, and not only that, not only was the policeman who did this not arrested, but the police actually, he just got arrested. Initially, he wasn't arrested. Initially, they gave him extra protection because they were worried about the police officer instead of treating him like a criminal that he is. Israel's internal affairs did absolutely nothing. They're looking for ways. They spent the entire week looking for ways to kind of cover his butt. They eventually came out with an account from the police officer that they were driving wildly, and that's what caused them to go off to drive off the road, and that there was no collision with the police vehicle. There's just one problem. There's actually a picture of the police vehicle's fender completely banged up, and that's obviously from that. So that didn't work. Now there's been at least 2 weeks of protests. Some of them have been, let's just say, mostly peaceful, to use CNN's terminology. And finally, the Internal Affairs has decided to arrest the police officer, but it's probably not gonna evolve into any actual punishment. It looks like it's basically just a show trial to try to calm people down. But the Internal Affairs in Israel is proven to be just about as corrupt as the police themselves. I can get into that if you want as well. And what we have here is an entire population of young settlers, a new generation of young settlers, of young Israelis in Judea and Samaria, who do not trust the police, they do not trust their government, who see their government understandably as their enemy just as much as the Arab terrorists. And this is and people don't understand why there's this tension. Well, that's why there's tension, because there's an organized campaign on behalf of the Israeli government. I don't know who's behind it. If it's not Netanyahu, then he definitely is completely apathetic about it. Like, Netanyahu gets upset if the police interrogate him, 5 times a week for 20 hours. But if the police actually kill a kid, he says nothing. So it's hard to know who's involved, who's behind it. But within the Israeli government, obviously, not everyone in the Israeli government. There's amazing people in the Israeli government, but inside the Israeli government, especially the police. I actually did a report on this. I'll happily share my report of the top brass in the Israeli police are very anti-Judea and Samaria. And they're very left-wing. I don't know how they got there, but they're there and they're calling the shots. And they are the ones who are allocating this immense budget to this unit of the police called the Yamar Shai, who is essentially only enforcing the law against, if they're even enforcing the law at all, against Jewish teenagers in Judea and Samaria who want to do nothing more than basically build villages to prevent Arab takeovers of the land of Israel.
If I can, you have a grasp on Israeli politics, which is like juggling and having people throw balls at you while you're juggling. I don't know how you do it. It's such a maelstrom of activity, of contrary actions, contrary beliefs. It's really, I don't understand it. I understand it more from a political, from a historical perspective, in that it's difficult to understand that the Jewish state actually was begun as an anti-Jewish refuge city established by secular Zionists who were anti-Jewish. That was, and that continued. And I think that's really the basis of this. It's not, it might be political, but it doesn't make sense as much politically as it does historically. And this, I think, came to a head when after the founding of the religious Zionist movement. What happened was secular Zionism began with the kibbutznik, the bare-chested kibbutznik jumping from the tractor into the tank in order to fight off the Arab nations, who then started wanting swimming pools, condominiums, and a more comfortable Tel Aviv lifestyle without any of the headaches. Meanwhile, as they were going down in their Zionist commitment to Israel, the religious who began as a with a Torah centric movement began focusing more on the land of Israel, and their Zionist sentiment began to rise. And in the end, you had the secular Zionists leading and saying, "Here we are in the government, in the police, in the media, in the academics, leading." And they were being cheered on by the religious Zionists, and that sentiment was not returned. That loving was not returned by the secular Zionists, because they were now a little bit embarrassed because they weren't so Zionist. And that came to a head in the expulsion of Jews from Gush Katif, what is now called incorrectly, biblically Gaza. And that was not a peace agreement. There were no Arab nations or Arab leaders involved in that whatsoever. There was no signed document. There was nothing. It was strictly a power play meant to destroy, to shatter the world of secular Zionism, to sever the ties and the commitment, any commitment that the secular Zionists would have towards the religious Zionists. And the religious Zionists were left shattered and abandoned. And what we're seeing now, and to make matters worse, the Oslo Accords were also a huge stab in the back that made it possible for the Israeli security forces to operate against the religious Zionists. And what we're left with is religious Zionists who now they're saying, "Look, you abandon us, we're going to take the ball and run with it."
Well, yeah. So it's, Herzl, who basically came up with the idea of the state of Israel, was extremely against religion. Not only that, but
as well as Ben-Gurion.
Leaders. Well, yeah, Ben-Gurion knew a lot of Torah, and he was a guy who wouldn't allow Arabs to leave their villages at night without a permit. He actually annexed Lud, Ramla, and Haifa. So, but he was actually he was a Freemason as well. Most people don't know that, as was Jabotinsky. But here's the thing: if you know what the Erev Rav is, this is kind of this rebellious group of people who came with the nation of Israel from Egypt, who allegedly converted. Mixed multitude. And there's a lot of people who are saying that these are the people in the end of days who run Israel, who are actually the leaders of Israel. We only have a minute left. Let me just try to extend our time. So they're leading Israel, and this is all part of, and Israel is fine if it's just a little haven for Jews from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv and not much further. But once you get into the biblical heartland and you have religious Jews living there trying to reestablish the Davidic kingdom, then these secular Jews get very uncomfortable, and you can see the results. Since Israel's inception, there's been a concerted effort to stem any sort of spirituality or religiosity blossoming forth from the more God-fearing Jews who came back to Israel. So, and you know, the easiest targets are a bunch of teenagers in Judea and Samaria. So I believe that all settlers, all Israeli Jews who live in Judea and Samaria owe these hilltop youth a big debt of gratitude, because they're essentially the front lines. If it wasn't for them, those police would be harassing me as someone who lives in a more, you know, so-called established town like Efrat. And, you know, and what we're seeing now is this. Yeah, go ahead.
You call Efrat established. I moved to Gush Etzion. I lived right near where you live now. I lived just a few minutes drive away, going back more than 20 years, I believe. And there were fights between IDF soldiers and very established mainstream homeowners because they wanted to expand their neighborhoods. There were absolute fights, and it was tragic. They used to send me out to guard these places because the Arabs would come and destroy anything that was built or any beginnings of buildings. So yeah, Efrat may seem mainstream now, but that's a veneer. I think that can be taken away in a minute. That can.
So basically,
I mean, they consider Ma'ale Adumim to be a settlement, and Ma'ale Adumim is a huge city that's almost convergent with Jerusalem, and even that's on the cutting board.
So my point is that what we have, the situation we're in right now, is like this. You have a very large group of God-fearing Jewish teenagers who are essentially doing nothing wrong except for building houses on empty hilltops in Judea and Samaria, and the police are essentially doing whatever they can to figure out how they can arrest these kids on what charges they can arrest these kids on. And sometimes they don't even arrest them on charges. They just kind of take them in as a form of harassment. They take them into the station. Now there's kind of a little battle going on between these kids, these hilltop youth who are protesting virtually every night against the police. The police don't want to let up. The hilltop youth don't want to let up. And this is the type of thing that could theoretically devolve into a type of civil war in Israel, which involves, you know, a government who since its inception, since '67, has passive aggressively regretted and, you know, taking over Judea and Samaria, and an entire population subsect of Israeli Jews who were once loyal to that same government and are now getting a very rude awakening and realizing that their loyalty might have been misplaced, and that, you know, there's only so much they can get bitten by the hand that feeds that they're feeding. So that's why I'm actually following this much more closely than I think a lot of other reporters are, because I've been on the ground with these people and I understand, you know, where this could theoretically go. This should be the hottest story in Israel.
I think you're absolutely right. I think people are seeing this as a one-time incident, as a protest about one issue and one incident, and it's absolutely not. It is a huge
campaign.
And it's a social issue as well as a political issue that could permanently divide Israel, socially, politically, and even geographically. And that's what we're looking at right now. I think that.
Yeah. Okay. And I think I guess our time is almost up. I think Josh is going to end this at exactly 5:35. But, you know, just
before I get off, I just want to answer Stephanie Womack's. I apologize. There was a scheduling difficulty, so we'll be speaking to Naomi Khan from Rigavim about the battle for trees. We'll be speaking with her before the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat. Basically, how the battle for the land of Israel is also the battle for ecology in Israel, for the green Israel.
This interview is very important that people understand.
Absolutely, this is
a lot of people don't understand what these riots are about. Why are they freaking out about one kid who was, inadvertently, killed by a police officer? Because the story is much bigger and much longer than Ahuvya Sandak, and it's important that people understand that Ahuvya Sandak is just a martyr, but he's,